Marcus had worked at the same factory for years. Every morning he walked through the heavy steel gates, his heart burdened with the knowledge that today, like every other day, he would face the same discriminatory comments and actions from his co-workers. Marcus was the only black man on the assembly line, and though he was one of the most skilled workers, he was often overlooked for promotions and excluded from the camaraderie that the others enjoyed. The factory floor was a noisy place, filled with the sounds of machines and chatter. But beneath the surface, there was a tension that Marcus felt every day. His co-workers would often make offhanded remarks about his race, jokes that were meant to belittle and isolate him. They would question his abilities, suggest that he didn't belong there, and even sabotage his work to make him look incompetent. Despite this, Marcus kept his head down, worked harder than anyone else, and tried to prove himself through his dedication and skill. One day, the factory announced that they were looking for a new supervisor. Marcus knew he had the experience and qualifications for the job, but he also knew that the odds were stacked against him. As the weeks went by, it became clear that most of his co-workers were vying for the position, and the atmosphere on the factory floor grew even more hostile. Rumors started spreading that Marcus was trying to take the job away from someone more deserving. The whispers followed him everywhere, and the stares became colder. When the day of the interview came, Marcus walked into the office with his heart pounding. He answered every question with confidence, drawing on years of experience. But when he left the room, he could see the smirks on his co-workers' faces. They were already celebrating his failure. The next morning, the factory buzzed with anticipation. The boss, Mr. Wilson, gathered everyone in the break room to announce the new supervisor. Marcus stood in the back, trying to brace himself for the inevitable disappointment. To everyone who applied, Mr. Wilson began, I want to say that this decision was not easy. We had many strong candidates. Marcus felt the weight of those words pressing down on him, and he could almost hear the mocking laughter of his co-workers. But then, something unexpected happened. However, Mr. Wilson continued, there is one person who has consistently shown dedication, skill, and the ability to rise above challenges. That person is Marcus. The room fell silent. Marcus could hardly believe what he had heard. He looked around, expecting to see faces of support, but instead, he was met with glares and disbelief. The announcement did not bring the congratulations he had hoped for. Instead, the room filled with tension. His co-workers were furious. How could someone like Marcus, they thought, take a job meant for someone like them? Over the next few weeks, the hostility grew. Marcus was no longer just facing casual remarks. He was now dealing with open resentment. His team refused to listen to him, ignored his instructions, and some even tried to undermine his authority. Every day felt like a battle, and Marcus began to question if the promotion was worth the pain it was causing him. Then one day, things took a darker turn. Marcus arrived at the factory to find his locker vandalized, slurs and threats scrawled across it. He reported it to Mr. Wilson, but the response was underwhelming. Boys will be boys, the boss said dismissively, telling Marcus to brush it off and not make a big deal out of it. But it was a big deal. The attacks on Marcus didn't stop. One evening, as he was leaving the factory late, he was cornered in the parking lot by a group of his co-workers. They taunted him, pushing him around, calling him names. Marcus tried to walk away, but they followed him, blocking his path. The harassment escalated until one of them threw a punch. Marcus defended himself, but he was outnumbered and outmatched. When he reported the incident, Mr. Wilson's response was even colder. "You should have just walked away," he said, clearly more concerned about the factory's reputation than Marcus's safety. The situation had reached a breaking point. Marcus realized that the very system meant to protect and uplift him was stacked against him. Marcus was left with bruises and a deep sense of betrayal. But more than that, he was left with a choice: stay and fight against a system that was determined to push him out, or leave and protect his peace. The thought of quitting crossed his mind several times, but each time he pushed it away. He didn't want to give his tormentors the satisfaction of seeing him defeated. The following week, tensions boiled over. Marcus noticed that some of his co-workers were intentionally messing up their work, hoping it would reflect poorly on him. The factory's productivity dropped, and deadlines were missed. Yet, despite the obvious sabotage, Mr. Wilson turned a blind eye. Instead, he called Marcus into his office and questioned his leadership abilities. The implication was clear. If things didn't improve, Marcus would be blamed. Feeling cornered, Marcus decided to confront his team. He called a meeting, hoping to address the issues head-on and find a way to work together. But the meeting quickly turned hostile. One of the senior workers, a man named Dave, stood up and sneered, "You don't belong here, Marcus. You never did. We don't take orders from someone like you." The room echoed with murmurs of agreement, and Marcus felt the walls closing in on him. He tried to keep his composure, to explain that they all needed to work together, but the words fell on deaf ears. The team walked out, leaving Marcus standing alone in the empty room, feeling more isolated than ever. Later that day, Marcus found an anonymous note on his desk. It read, "Leave while you still can." The threat was clear, and for the first time, Marcus felt genuinely afraid. He took the note to Mr. Wilson, expecting support, but instead, he was met with indifference. "Maybe it's best if you take some time off," Mr. Wilson suggested, his tone implying that Marcus was the problem, not the solution. Marcus left the office feeling defeated. He knew that taking time off would only give his coworkers more ammunition against him. They would see it as a sign of weakness, as proof that he couldn't handle the job. But he also knew that staying would mean enduring more abuse, more isolation, and more pain. That night, as he sat at home nursing his wounds, both physical and emotional, Marcus realized something important. He was fighting a losing battle. The factory wasn't just a place of work. It was a battleground where the odds were stacked against him from the start. The discrimination he faced wasn't just from a few bad apples. It was systemic, ingrained in the very fabric of the workplace. The next day, Marcus made a decision. He walked into the factory with his head held high, ignoring the snickers and glares from his coworkers. He went straight to Mr. Wilson's office and handed in his resignation. Mr. Wilson looked at the paper, then at Marcus, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Was it regret or just relief? "Are you sure this is what you want?" he asked. But Marcus could tell he wasn't really concerned. Marcus nodded. "I deserve better than this," he said firmly. As he left the office for the last time, Marcus felt free. The factory was no longer his prison. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he had taken the first step towards reclaiming his dignity. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the factory yard. Marcus looked at the place that had been his job and his problem, then left. He left a place that had never really welcomed him. Marcus was in limbo after leaving the factory. He was happy to leave, but unsure what would happen next. He spent his days looking for a new job, but it was slow, and he was still upset about the discrimination he'd faced. He felt like he was still carrying the weight of those experiences. He had a few interviews, but none seemed promising. Marcus doubted himself, wondering if leaving was the right choice. The factory was hell, but at least it was familiar. Now he was lost, looking for a place to belong. Maybe there isn't one. One day, Marcus got a call from an old friend, James. James worked at a tech company that was hiring. The job wasn't in a factory, but Marcus's skills were transferable. James told him to apply and said he'd help. Marcus was unsure at first. Starting over in a new field was scary, but he knew he couldn't let fear stop him. He got the job after a few interviews. It was a fresh start where his past wouldn't define him. On his first day, Marcus felt excited and nervous. The office was quiet and professional. His new coworkers were friendly and helped him. It was different from before, and Marcus relaxed, thinking maybe things would be different this time. Marcus thrived in his new role. He learned the job quickly and started helping the team. He was no longer defined by his past. He found a place where he was valued for his skills and his race didn't define him. One evening, Marcus got an email at work. It was from Tom, a former coworker at the factory. The message was short but sincere. It apologized for how Marcus had been treated and said he admired his strength and determination. Tom said the factory had changed since Marcus left. New policies addressed the issues Marcus had faced. Marcus read the email again, feeling a mix of emotions. He knew he left the factory a better place, but he still felt pain. It was a small victory, a sign that things could change. Marcus closed his laptop and stepped outside. The sky was clear, and the air was crisp. As he walked to his car, Marcus felt at peace. He faced darkness, but came out stronger, ready for whatever came next. He knew he'd found his place.